And will the city clerk please call roll?
Mayor Mark Olstead.
Here.
Council President Brian Larson.
Here.
Council Vice President Tim Riepel.
Here.
Council Members Tammy Schumacher.
Here.
Ben Pokshavinsky.
Here.
Dale Helms.
Here.
Donald Casemy.
Here.
Karen Peterson.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. Item number 1, presentation from West Central Regional Water District and request for letter of support. Go ahead, Reid.
All right. Thank you, Council President, Council Members. I'll just briefly introduce Lucas Spaeth. He is with the West Central Regional Water District. You recall the work session a couple of weeks ago. I had some slides on a presentation included in the packet. At its core, West Central Regional Water is seeking letters of support, and from our city, they've had some preliminary discussions with Keith with Water and Light and been out to our water treatment plant. And as they study the capacity to be able to provide a regional water district to parts of Polk, Norman, and Clay County, they're hopeful that East Grand Forks would be willing to participate in at least a study of the level of whether or not our city could potentially be a supplier to the water district among a number of water suppliers. So with that, I'll hand it off to Lucas to give a brief presentation and hopefully be able to answer questions for you all.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you, Council. Superintendent of Utilities for the City of Hallstead, Minnesota. A water district, it's a water supply district for fresh water to 30 communities, around 40,000 people that have been kind of recognized in that. You see the map up there. So I think you guys are familiar with the map that was designed as our survey area in the West Central District. In that process, or in this process, it's all done by the state statute, so it's called Minnesota Statute 116A. It gives anybody the ability, mostly counties, the ability to form a regional water or wastewater facilities. That could be pipeline or treatment plants, those sort of things. We're actually going through it. We're the first rural water district to be in formation for about 45 years since it's been gone through. So we've run into some hiccups. The original. Thank you. The original mapping that was recognized in the small communities in western Norman County, southwest Polk County, and then northwest Clay County. Those original communities were the original boundary line, and going back to multiple meetings with the county boards, they in turn, after I would say about 3 or 4 meetings with each of them, they in turn wanted to see this benefit go to the whole county. It broadened our scope of work that we were required to do according to statute. But it also didn't broaden the scope of maybe project 1. So this will all be phased. Obviously, this is many millions of dollars that it'll take to do pipeline in recognition of what it's going to take and where we're going to get water supply. That was our initial conversation with your water guys and Keith behind me, was to recognize some of these water supplies that had either permitted water or they had the ability in their plant to supply the water, recognizing that those are available probably only in bigger water systems. So we actually met with Grand Forks, East Grand Forks, Crookston. We've met with 3 different North Dakota regional water districts, all the way down to Manador, North Dakota, which, if you guys know where that is, it's about 10 miles from the South Dakota border, but that touches a little bit of the Clay County portion of it. The rural customers that were recognized in this, so MDH does have some numbers on just kind of a representative sample of what rural water
looks like in the counties, and that's where some of these arsenic level numbers come from. So Norman County at 43, Clay County 39, Polk County 21, and of course that's representative. It could be up or down, but based on their samples that they've received, that's how they see it. And actually, we recognize Monoman County as another one that's around that 40% arsenic level in their rural well systems. One of the fortunate things that we recognize in that Project 1, which would be the Highway 75 corridor from Climax, which is in Polk County, down to Cragness, which is in Clay County, all the way along there. A lot of the infrastructure, so the capital that needed to improve the infrastructure that's there, is a lot of it's original from the 60s. So it's due for these project dollars, USDA rural development dollars, to either start putting in $3 million plants in small communities and try to figure it out. I'll tell you from where we're at, feel like kind of a little big town. We've actually contracted with 5 different communities in the recent past, up to the last 5 years. So most of our neighbors, I have recently just started working with the city of Glendon. They don't have an operator, so we have 2 Class C operators that we can kind of help them fulfill their certification needs. Obviously, that's a problem, and as we try to find workforce in the rural, this regionalization seems to be a real good aspect of the future. I don't know if you want to. Yeah, we can start there. Yeah. Okay. Right now, we're in our 5th year of going down to the state and asking for bonding dollars. They didn't pass a bonding bill last year, but we were in the end of what there was going to be for a bonding bill for about a tune of around $4.5 million. We're also in it again this year, so there's a House file sponsored by Representative Gander, who represents some of it, and then Representative Jim Joy. They both authored that. I'll actually be testifying at hearing on Thursday for the water district to beg for more money, I guess. So right now we're requesting $9.7 million with the idea that we're probably not going to get that. Fortunately, pipeline project, we can probably build A to B, B to C maybe, with a short haircut on what we're asking for down there. We're not looking for, right now we're not looking for a regional plant. We're looking for water supply and then the pipeline. So that is how East Grand Forks was requested, to see what's available, what your plant capacity is for. We'll have a formal request in, with your support, and that's more of a request for information, but a formal request for information on what our district would need, and that's still at a high level. So according to the statute, the Clay County District Court will be the deciders on if we have a feasible project. If our project is feasible, the judge actually orders us to go out and build it. So it's an education of, all the way up to the judge, knowing on what's feasible, what's not. It's not just affordable, but can we recognize some of these small communities that need it? Can they find USDA rural development? It's going to be time consuming. A lot of different funding agents involved in it, especially thinking of an application for a rural development in each small community. When you're talking 600 people or less, and you've got to put together 8 of these in a row, and then try to get the funding to all fall through at the same time. So really need the state support. We were successful. Amy Klobuchar, Senator Klobuchar, did get Norman County $1.75 million for the project. And she also got $1.75 million for the city of Felton, which is another community in the 300 people range. So we do have some federal funds that are going back to the project, and we're waiting for some state just to make it affordable, but meet that feasibility portion of it. I think you guys have some questions maybe of me, if I can help try to explain any.
Thanks for coming, appreciate it. A couple questions I do have, and maybe you can answer it, maybe Keith can answer it, or somebody else can. what other agreements do we have with other districts in the other districts that are around that probably touch your mapping area? How is that going to affect them, and I guess then affect us as a city?
Yeah, you will know more than I do about your.
Well, we have an agreement we did with Marshall Polk. Back when I first got here, we wanted to make sure in time of drought that we had enough water, and so we had a meeting with them, and I can't remember if we signed something or not. We may have that said if there wasn't enough water that we could partner on getting X amount of gallons per year. And since that time, I mean, I've learned a little bit more about the system and learned some things about the lower Red Lake Dam. And so I'm not as concerned about that any longer, because the last time we had a major drought here was a few years back. And we were talking to the colonel of the Corps at the time, and he agreed to let 100 CFS go down the lower Red Lake release from the dam. And so Grand Forks and East Grand Forks, we could probably get by on 25 CFS. So if they're going to allow 100 minimum to come down and half of it makes it here, we have plenty of water unless it really, really gets bad. And so I felt a lot better after that process. So we're staying engaged with that. Otherwise, the water is running right through anyway. Our plant can produce up to 3.5 million gallons a day. We maybe use an average of 900 to 1 million gallons a day. So we're just idling. And we all know our rates are pretty high because we paid for all our infrastructure. We have no loans. We've always kind of taken care of ourselves. And so to me, why wouldn't you want to help a neighbor? I mean, they have trouble with their arsenic, et cetera. And so as long as they do things the right way, and if they're interested in paying say we'd have to sit down and talk about a connection fee because we have infrastructure and they pay our rates. I mean, why wouldn't we want to sell a little more water to try and maintain our rates and keep them from going up? And so that's kind of my 3-minute speech on this. So.
Maybe ours would go down then.
And maybe ours would slow down a little bit unless let the rest catch up.
So with that, other districts, you mentioned Marshall, how does that affect your relationship with them? I mean, with the area you cover, I guess the question is there's some maybe headbutting or some discussions that maybe you have gone through that?
We've sat down with them. It's been a couple of months, and have a gentleman's agreement, but to put it on paper, we're still actually putting that back and forth. So we have a memorandum of understanding that's between our legal teams, I guess, at this point, and that would kind of outline that whole blue area. I think it's described as Zone 5 in our mapping. That map was drawn based on a wellhead protection plan that was supplied to the state for the Marshall Polk line. So the definitiveness of it wouldn't be, I would say, it's a fuzzy line. The Polk County Commissioners would like to make it a fuzzy line, that it's the feasibility of serving a customer up there. We recognize that they have a water plant that's not far from that line, so feasibility of us serving it, and we recognize that when we had our conversation the last time. In addition to that, our conversation was so that the manager and myself, or that their boards were visiting back and forth, and we're keeping each other up to date. We don't want to duplicate a survey in an area where, especially when they have a plant a mile or two away, that we would be trying to infringe on that. So the mapping was really done by the county board to make sure that it was available, that it was something that if people are interested, that they're gonna have that knowledge. And so, I mean, we've had conversations with their engineer on it as well, which, I mean, he sees it as theirs, and I see it as, well, it's whatever is feasible, and that's, according to the statute, that's how we're going to do it, and then just communicate.
It comes down to territory. I mean, they're going to be servicing someone, they're going to expect that they get paid for what they're doing, or not getting something taken away from them, I guess is my thought process on this. I don't have a problem supporting it as long as I know that the districts that are, joining together, that there's nothing to be taken away from them, and they start having issues where then all of a sudden we're like,
And we appreciate that sentiment as exactly, like, we don't want to have an argument with any of the water districts. The water districts, as we see it, they have very good reputations to serve clean water, to get to people that can't get it easily. Those reputations, I mean, that's how our district is being formed, to hold on to those reputations for the rural water districts, and as well as we have a pretty high presence of county board members on our board right now. Maybe not in the future, they'll appoint someone else, but as far as the governance and the financing and, the financial policy, the way that we're building it, high presence of county commissioners to have those, have that insight and have that, make sure that's, solidified in our planning.
I'm sure there's going to be some one-offs that's, okay, it's beneficial for this district and beneficial for that district. So it's got to be some, instances where, hey, well, it's going to be more feasible to go this route than this route.
I would gather that, yeah. Yeah, I mean, even, so we met with Crookston, and they were just in the forum talking about selling water to us as West Central. But I think that was one way for them to get over the cost of doing their aquifer study, was that, hey, if we do this, maybe there's a potential, offset to the cost when we start selling water, back into more customers.
I just had a few questions, just so I kind of understand the overall concept of the study. When you say that water could potentially be sourced from East Grand Forks, this could potentially be a pipeline of clean water after our water treatment plant that would then serve the area in the map shown here on the screen?
There would be some short-term and some long-term planning on our side. Short-term, we're not looking to build any kind of multi-million-dollar plant, especially when, we're going to the state trying to find dollars to build the pipeline. There could be raw water sales in the future. Okay. But, that would be based on, your permits that you have with the DNR, as well as, where we're going to source it. Our last meeting with the DNR, and actually Keith was in attendance with that, they're really worried about aquifers all around Minnesota, and they'd like to see some aquifers. Right now we've kind of recognized East Central Regional Water District, that's on the North Dakota side, as the probable supplier, but that'll all have to come out through the engineering study for feasibility. And right now they're about to bid a project that will be a 25,000 head dairy farm that'll be 3 miles west of Halstead. So that pipeline is likely to be built with the North Dakota permit process going through. So that puts a pipeline 3 miles away from my home now, and 25,000 cows too.
Question for Keith on that. How does our water rights work here at the City of East Grand Forks as far as like our allocation of the Red Lake River? Is there a certain gallons per year or acre feet that we're designated as a city?
Yeah, we have an appropriations from the DNR for how much water we can take out a year. I'm not sure the exact number, but it's way more than we need. And so, yeah, I mean, they do it throughout the whole state. So then that's how they manage that.
Okay. And, this is an interesting conversation. My mind goes to a worst case scenario, a time of extreme drought in the future where water is a very critical resource. In the support of this letter, and if the project is built in the future, how does East Grand Forks rightfully protect water rights for our citizens in that type of scenario?
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying. So what we're doing right now is we're engaged with the LAWA project, and so I'm engaged with the the Corps of Engineers, and they're engaged with the Red Lake DNR, and we get our water comes from the lower Red Lake, of course. And so, like I had said earlier, one of the things that will assure us that we have enough water is that we can maintain a minimum amount of flow coming out of the lower Red Lake. And so the Red Lake DNR is doing a study right now with the Red Lake Nation, and we're waiting to see what they come up with for the aquatics. Yeah, but I've had them tell me that the DNR said initially that they can't see it going any lower than 100 CFS because of the aquatics. But I want some more certainty of that. And so that's kind of a long story as to how we're keeping an eye on that. Now, how we would guarantee it, of course, is this is very preliminary. And so the way I look at it is we're partners. We'd like to help our neighbors out, and we'd like to help everybody get clean, good drinking water. And so when we're signing on to that, that's what we're signing up for. As far as if an extreme drought comes along, you're going to want something in the contract or the agreement that states that. But I know when droughts come, the DNR, there's who has priority. And so they start shutting off things as the drought gets worse. And so that's another way that it gets managed as well. But again, I guess what I would say is if we have some guarantee that we're going to get 100 CFS coming down the Red Lake River, it's 175 miles. I was on the Red Lake corridor. Even if we get half of that CFS, we got twice what we would need for Grand Forks and East Grand Forks to have an adequate supply. So I'm not concerned, because otherwise the water's going into the Red River and it's heading to Canada. So why wouldn't we want to sell it? But we'd put all the necessarily. East Grand Forks is our priority, of course, and we make sure when we draft an agreement that it's got all that language in there.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thanks, Keith.
I don't have a question. I've got a question based on chemical or problems with the water, iron, manganese. I'm sure everybody's read a lot of studies how the northern part of the United States, southern part of Canada, #1 in the world for MS. And how not quite as popular is Parkinson's. And my diagnosis with Parkinson's came from ingestion of well water containing manganese. So, this isn't just a supply thing. You look at what it costs the entire country, and I think that's something else to consider.
So that's a good point as to why you want to make sure that these the smaller communities have good water. Because right now they're fighting they can't even get operators to manage their systems, and their systems are, just like he said earlier, they're getting run down. And so to me, a regional concept makes a lot of sense, and you have a way of, from an agency perspective and a community perspective, you have a way to better plan for it.
If I can say a couple more comments. It's been enlightening to me to meet with 11 different water systems, and I just met with actually the Department of Health, and their worry is aquifer health and supplying safe water, and I commented to them. I said, well, you guys are pretty lucky, because we've met with 11 of these bigger water suppliers, city water suppliers, regulated water suppliers, that they're well aware of how much them aquifers mean, and what clean water means for those communities. So, when we're asking we fully expect a very conservative answer on how much water we could potentially get from East Grand Forks or, any one of these water systems. Just our initial conversations would say, they're going to be really conservative, and they're going to hold their drought water back. They're not going to put that on the market to put themselves into danger, as Keith said, and we heard that from every single one of them along our travels here.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to item number 2 here. Northstar Neighbors Community Land Trust updates. Mr. Huttunen?
All right. Thank you again, Council President. Corey Bushy is here with Northstar Neighbors as well. Wherever you want, Corey, swing up to a chair that's got an open mic here. Kind of a two-part RCA tonight to go through. In the second half of it, Corey will be able to be here to help answer questions on. The first piece of this is, if you all recall, about this time last year, maybe April of last year, we agreed to enter into a purchase agreement on 4 lots in Water's Edge First subdivision for Northstar Neighbors, which is the community land trust model. They had to, after signing those agreements, then write grant proposals to the Minnesota Housing for funds to be able to construct homes that could be built in this community land trust model. And they were successful in having enough funds granted to be able to build 4 homes. So that's the exciting good news to share today. One piece of it that's come up with our discussion in the last 6 months or so is lot number 1 in the Water's Edge First subdivision. I'll find a map here to show that. Water's Edge First is and lot 1 is the blue shaded map. This is a lot that the city had agreed to sell to the Forks Builders Association in 2023. They purchased it on the $1,000 down payment program with the intention of building a Northland project house on it. And if you follow the EDA meetings, it came back to the EDA meeting shortly, maybe first part of the summer of 2023, that since the Northland project house program was canceled, Forks Builders had no need for the lot and asked that the city would take it back. There were a few issues with the ability for the city to just cleanly take that back because the city has an agreement with realtors to sell these lots through a realtors agreement and had already paid out the commission for the realtors. So it wasn't a really cost benefit for the city to bring it back. But we did extend the offer to Northstar Neighbors to see if they would help us in this and being good friends and neighbors with us and buy this lot from Forks Builders for the purpose of using it as a community land trust lot. They did agree to do that. So the first part of the request would be that the council allow lot number 1, the one highlighted in blue, to be included in the land trust model. And then the second part of that request would be that lot 4 would be the one that Northstar Neighbors would swap out and would not intend to build on this year. And they've actually asked if for that same $1,000 down payment in earnest money, if they could have first right of refusal to buy that lot for a future build should the program be successful with the first 4. So that's been through the EDA. The EDA board was agreeable to that, and that would be the first part of the request we'd ask is, again, Forks Builders lot be included in the land trust model, and then lot 4 be available on a $1,000 earnest money payment for a first right of refusal. If some other developer would come in the meantime and make a proposal to buy that, or a potential builder make a proposal to buy lot 4, then we would just notify Northstar Neighbors of that and give them the first opportunity to buy it instead. So that's that. I think maybe pause there if there's any questions.
Just more of a statement. I'm just glad we could work things out with the Forks Builders so they can move on. So I appreciate the work that everybody's done on that. So
Thank you. Yeah, and certainly appreciate Northstar Neighbors being willing to participate and help us with that. Okay, if no questions on that piece of it, then we'll move on to the size of the homes. That's the second part of this RCA. And I'll let Corey explain most of this. Northstar Neighbors, after getting the approval from us to build the homes, they had an RFP process to try to solicit a builder. They were successful in soliciting Thompson Homes to be able to build all 4 of the homes. Those that are familiar with Thompson Homes, they have kind of a stock option of homes to choose from with various home designs. And those have stock square footages for the size of the livable space and of the 2-stall garages. In our resolution agreeing to sell the lots to Northstar Neighbors, we did include requirements on square footage minimums for the size of the home and the size of the 2-stall garage. Those minimums were for a 2-story or bi-level home, a minimum 1,800 square feet, and then a 2-stall garage which was a minimum of 575 square feet. The Thompson home options are slightly smaller on square footage on the home side. The 2 that they're proposing to build One is 1,797 square feet, so 3 square feet short. The other one is 1,793 square feet, so 7 feet short. The garage part of it is somewhat smaller than that. Rather than 575, still a 2-stall garage, but one of the 2 stalls would be 418 square feet, and the other would be 480 square feet. So that would be the second part of the proposal, or the request would be consideration for allowing some modifications to the size that we had required in that resolution. And I'd pass that to Corey for any comments or thoughts you want to share, Corey.
Sure, I'd just be happy to share a few more things. So we've gone through some processes to try and meet the square footage that's in the agreement, right? So we've asked Thompson Homes, how could you make this garage bigger? How could we, make this work? And we can make anything work, but at a cost, right? So on that smaller garage where, the main, this one here, to make that meet the minimum of the agreement, they would have to add kind of a goofy wing off, which would be to the left side, and with a window that would kind of make the garage a little bit bigger, and at a cost of $23,000 per unit, which really could go into our affordability. The other one, and actually, we have some bi-level homes we're proposing. When we originally worked with Thompson Homes, we had hoped to do 2 slab-on-grade, completely one-level homes. Unfortunately, they're just too much money. We can get significantly more square footage with a bi-level home than we can with the slab-on-grade. So not only are these, to meet these requirements, there's no quick fix to just add the 3 square feet or the 7 square feet without going to a whole new model that puts us into a whole new cost category. And these added costs are, if it was, the other thing is costs have gone up even since we wrote that grant a year ago. And we built in contingency in the grant for that, to knowing that costs would go up. But those costs got eaten up as we predicted they would. So now this extra $23,000 per unit or $10,000 per unit, is again added on top of costs that have already gone up. We have to pass those costs on to the home buyer. So, like any business, if we pass that cost on, we eliminate people from the market, right? So, as we narrow that market, it gets really hard to sell the homes. If you guys can remember, we have a ceiling on about $90,000 in household income for us that we have to meet for, folks have to be under that in order to purchase these homes, because we want to make them accessible to people who can't afford them, right? The higher cost that is, all of a sudden our market is someone that has to make between $85,000 and $90,000, right? And it just, even $10,000 makes a big difference on that affordability, especially with the 7% interest rates and things like that we're seeing. The one thing that I did want to mention, so part of the other thing that's making this a little bit tricky is Minnesota Housing does require a no-step entry. So in order to do this, we're hoping that we'll get a waiver to do 2 bi-level homes that won't meet that requirement. Otherwise, if they're not willing to give us that waiver, we would do 4 of that 2-story model, where that slab on grade is entry, and then we'd meet that no-step requirement. We'd love to have some diversity, so it'd be nice to have a couple different options. So we're gonna go for that waiver, and actually for under that bi-level plan, we get more square footage for the same cost. So trying to think of anything else I wanted to share with you guys, but the other thing, we've also thought about, do we go back to the drawing board, find a new builder, all of that kind of stuff. All of that is also costly, takes time and money for us to make that happen, and it might not come back with any different results for making it more affordable. So what I'm really asking for would be to amend our agreement to just make it a 2-stall garage. I looked up a minimum 2-stall garage should be considered 2-stall is 400 square feet. And then just adjust that 2-story multi-level home requirement just down. I just picked 1,700 square feet instead of trying to pick 1,793 or something like that. So that would be the ask from Northstar neighbors.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments? Mr. Helms?
One question is, these will be built right on site, right, with a contractor? Okay, that's what I thought. The other thing, a comment I'd like to make is that the EDA, I know, feels that this is a good plan, and it's a good way for the city to get rid of these lots and get them back on the tax roll and all this other stuff, and I think they'll be a nice enough home. And the other part of the whole deal is, as you said, is to keep it affordable so we can get some of these people into a home. So I would like to see us go ahead and move and let them do their thing with their 17 and a little less square footage than what their First Amendment or First Agreement was.
All right, thank you, Mr. Helms. Mr. Pukshabinsky?
Thank you. The only question that I would have is, how big are the houses next door to these houses? Are they going to make this house look super small, or are they, relative in size?
I don't know the exact square footage of the houses next door. I don't know if Reid does. On my way into town today, I did a drive through there. My assumption is that they'll be a little bit smaller, but right now that's a very diverse kind of neighborhood for housing. There's townhomes there. There's a couple bigger homes. So I honestly think even if you guys have a few lots left that aren't up for grabs, it might open up the opportunity for someone to build a smaller house that, would fit the ones we're building. So I think it'll, it's my best guess. I haven't built one. We want to be good partners. If we get a waiver for being able to do, this bi-level home instead of having to do 4 of the same, we're going to work with our builder and the city and team and say, hey, does it make sense to do this style here because it's already next to this home versus this style, that I think that's what I can commit to now is we're going to do our best to make good decisions of, what model to use.
It was just a general question. I'm all for the program, so I think it's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Thank you so much. Again, thank you for doing this. I think it's well needed. One of the questions I do have with the remaining lots and, future building, are we going to be looking at more waivers for the covenants for size in that? Or is this just going to be a one-off?
Good question. In the subdivision that these lots are built, Water's Edge Second, there are no recorded covenants. There was a draft of covenants that I think some of the property owners that have built there have received, but they're not recorded at the county. So to that level, I think open dialogue with people that buy the homes and kind of trying to guide them towards homes that fit the aesthetics of the neighborhood is the best we can and should do. Just to clarify and to add further, Water's Edge First, the neighboring neighborhood, does have recorded covenants under these standards, and that's some of the background of where we came up with it in drafting the resolution a year ago.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? If not, I would just add, I think the request is very reasonable, and I think it's very important to focus on affordability and putting people in these houses in East Grand Forks. So thank you for everything that you're doing here, and wish you luck building these houses and getting people in them.
All right. Thank you so much, guys.
All right. Thank you very much. All right, let's move on to item number 3. Request to file plans and specifications for 2025 City Project Number 3, Lift Station 13 Rehabilitation. Mr. Emery.
Good evening. We are kind of putting finishing touches up on the plans and specs for the lift station 13 rehab project. Again, the scope of the work is in the wet well portion of the lift station, which is basically where the kind of the sewage comes into the lift station. We're replacing some piping and fittings in there that have deteriorated. And then in the valve pit structure, which is kind of the structure to the right there, kind of bad grade or whatever, but in there we're actually replacing the valving, fittings, and then also adding a flow meter in there so that they're able to, better monitor how much flow and stuff is coming out of that lift station. And then with that project, you can kind of see they're kind of between those, the two concrete structures there. You can see there's kind of an electrical control panel there, right? That's all the controls and such for the lift station. So what we're proposing there, and it's kind of shown, I think, on the site plan drawing, is we're looking to construct just like an 8-foot by 8-foot control building to get those electrical controls and stuff kind of out of the elements. It's probably one of the last places you want to be in the city of East Grand Forks in the middle of winter if it's windy and you're having to work on anything. So getting those out of the elements will be really nice. Then we're also looking at constructing just a 12-foot wide concrete driveway kind of going into the lift station site there. As you can kind of see, there's the existing private driveway just to the south there. That kind of that line that you can see kind of running, I guess east-west there, just right off the north edge of the driveway, or just that's basically an easement line. So in the past when the cities had to get in there to pull pumps, do maintenance on pumps, they've actually had to at times use the existing private driveway to get access, to the lift station. So when we met with the homeowner today, he was actually kind of excited about the fact that we're building a separate driveway as part of this project. So that's part of it. And then the next page just kind of give you just a little bit of an idea. What we're looking at for a controlled building, looking at kind of like an engineered type of siding, maintenance-free, kind of a product too that in the future, if it ever needed to be painted because it didn't fit the neighborhood or whatever, I mean, we could always, that product could always be painted. Looking at putting in a metal, metal roof, metal soffit fascia. We are doing kind of the steeper roof line, kind of that 10-12 roof line, again, just to try to match, what the home they're adjacent to looks like. So again, today when we were out there, we kind of reviewed this with the homeowner. And, he really had no concerns with the building, and he was glad to see that we're kind of, we're not just putting a tin metal shed there. It's going to be something that's kind of aesthetically pleasing. The biggest thing he wanted to make sure too is just it was secured, because he's seen things flying around and stuff too before when you get a strong wind up there, and so that building is going to sit on top of a concrete slab. It'll be anchored and stuff. So I mean it's a very secure building. So that's really probably the scope of the work. So again, we'll be bringing those final plans and specs to the council next week then, and we'd be looking at, setting a bid date then for 10 a.m. on April 8th. It would just be kind of looking at that point too to get the authorization from you guys to kind of proceed with advertising. So.
All right, thank you. Mayor?
Weird question for you. On the north side of 23rd, we have nothing. And to get any building or anything developed on that side, we'd have to go underneath. If there was development over there, would it go back this way and then head west, or would it stay on the north side? And is there any benefit looking at this to a point of future development on the north side of the 23rd? Anything different design or anything like that? Yeah. Not throw a wrench in it, I'm just asking this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is if you start looking at serving, property, let's say on the north side of 23rd, You're gonna be looking at, increasing probably the size of the lift station. Right now it's only 3 or 5 horsepower pumps, so very small pumps. The only thing it really serves is that residential development, which was the trailer park at one time, but,
So let's say that we did develop on the north side of 23rd was, I mean,
I think.
we'd have to
I
do
think
another
the
one on
plan
that.
is
maybe?
right now, kind of the ultimate is, I think the gravity sewer is deep enough that I think a lot of that north side is gonna probably be able to be served by gravity sewer from the lift station. It's on the north end of like 8th Street there. I think we're gonna be able to serve everything on the north side with gravity sewer. I don't think we will need a lift station on that side.
All right, thank you. Any other, Mr. Helms?
Yeah, thank you. This is just kind of a strange question. I don't know if you want to answer it, Mr. Emery, or if Jason does, but this lift station being so close to this property, this homeowner right here like it is, why are we not having complaints from him on smell like we do down the one on 8th? Can you answer that? Can you tell me that? 8th and 12th there, why?
I think a lot of it is, you're talking a few thousand gallons a day coming at this lift station,
Okay.
versus the master lift station, you got 1 million gallons a day of raw sewage, so. Yeah,
Okay, so
I think
it's just
that's
a
a lot,
bigger-
just the volume of water.
Everything, almost everything runs through that.
Yeah.
Okay.
The one on the.
I'm just curious, so why, because it's just kind of strange.
Right.
This is right there.
No, great question.
Thanks.
Okay, any further questions?
I got a question.
Mr. Pakshavinsky?
Thank you. Why put the driveway there, not coming off 23rd?
I think if you ask Nancy, we'd have a access issue. We can't put any more accesses off of 23rd right there, so.
All right.
Another thing is Third doesn't get blown in with a lot of snow
Sure.
because it's going right down the street, where 23rd gets inundated.
Oh, yeah, I live down there.
Yep.
All right, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, any further questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Emery. Let's move on here. Item number 4, consider approval of fare increase for fixed route bus and paratransit services. Ms. Ellis.
Thank you, Council President, council members. Just bringing this before you for approval, although to be quite honest with you, Cities Area Transit has already put it in their budget, and because they provide our service, it's more of a formality, less of a true asking. It does not provide much additional revenue to us, but what we do know is that any sort of help with our expenditures for operating then does show a decrease in the cost for us to purchase service from them. So it's still a good thing to see this as favorable as our prices continue to increase. Our ridership is going up, so we will definitely see some revenue increase on this, which is nice. We lost a lot of our riders during COVID, and we have actually seen some double-digit increases since then every year. So ridership is going back up. It is still a valuable service. With 12 years between our last increase, we're trying to do it so that it's not such a substantial change. And I know that we are not the only small urban in Minnesota that is looking to change or increase their fares. Fargo-Moorhead, I think, will be increasing as they had a substantial change in their, how would I call it? They went to a different classification, and so they're actually losing federal dollars because they're increasing in size. So we will see increase in fares, but it's still a reasonable fare, still cheaper than Uber. I know from an East Grand Forks standpoint, we're still very committed to looking at more of a door-to-door service with our microtransit and seeing that that would be a more valuable service for our community, which then would make a $2 fare to get to a different transfer station or get a ride within just minutes, very valuable to someone rather than having to use some taxi service. So I feel it's valuable. I think it's necessary, and I don't really have any other comments. We didn't receive any negative comments at any of our public meetings, and it was advertised on all of our buses, at all of our shelters, and at all of our transfer stations. So I don't think people were surprised, nor were they really upset about the increase. So.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Nancy? Go ahead, Tim.
So essentially, what you're saying to us is whether we accept it or not, it's already going to be done anyway, so it's irrelevant, that we should just go ahead and do it?
We could go back to our master operating agreement and come to some sort of an agreement like they have with the contract with UND and or NCTC. But then again, that also does open us up to how much the costs are for maintenance, and they can renegotiate what it costs for us then to have a service that we're required to have.
I'm for it. I just wanted to make sure that that was noted, that
Yes.
city council, what the heck.
Yeah, and to be fair, every plan that we've approved, whether it be our long-range transportation plan, metropolitan transportation plan, transit development plan, any of those things, fare increases are always mentioned as one way to bring in more revenue. And I don't think state or federal dollars are going to be something that's going to be handed out freely in the future. So I think we have to look at other opportunities of, bringing our costs down. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Riopel. Mr. Helms.
Thank you. That was going to kind of be my question, is that have they thought about what could happen if the government does cut these funds completely? Is this, have we looked, is this anything that's going to interfere with the service at all?
So East Grand Forks' federal allocation dollars are somewhat small, and we can only use up to 75% of those allocated dollars, which is under $200,000, towards operating. And so Minnesota does cover a very large portion of what our service is. North Dakota right now, because of the number of urban communities that have it, their legislature is looking at an increase. The state providing for their urban providers, which would be Grand Forks, Fargo, Bismarck, and Minot now as their metropolitan planning area. A lot of the Minnesota funds are either one through legislature or two through the sale of vehicles, so tariffs could strongly impact the amount of money that we'll be getting, because the sale of cars, with that tax that we're getting from that could, affect that as well. I do know tomorrow we have a Minnesota Transit Advisory Committee meeting, and we are looking at our budgets for 2026, 2027, and 2028 right now, just to see kind of where our dollars will be sitting. Minnesota has always been really good about finding ways to fund. So our rurals are getting, down to 5% local share. They're paying 5% local share, and they're getting 95% of their services paid for. So we may see a shift in where the dollars are used or how the dollars are used. But I'm hopeful that we still have the money coming in, and that maybe if we do in fact switch to more of a microtransit, we'll see some of our routes change or leave, dropping routes. And when you drop routes, then that does also decrease operations. I know for a fact that when we added UND, it was a savings for UND, and it did drop our service operational costs, because now it's spread out over 3 different entities paying for it rather than 2. So that did decrease our our fixed operating by almost $75,000 by adding UND. So the more people that are riding the bus, the more agencies that are using it, and, when we're better at how we're doing the service, I think that'll show some decreases or some savings as well, so.
Mayor Olsted.
I think the only way Minnesota's going to find funding is, like they always do, is raise taxes. Right now, they're looking at a $6 billion deficit, so I don't think Minnesota is going to be able money to come from anywhere. We're going to have issues in the next few years. So.
Yep. Transit has a reserve fund from those sales tax on the cars, so that is primarily where it's coming from. So I guess we will see some of it is STP dollars, some of it is federal dollars. We have not, I've spoke with FTA a number of different times, and they have not been given any ideas that Congress at this point is going to scratch any transit funding. So.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for Ms. Ellis? All right, thank you.
Yes. And just so you're aware, if I do hear something about our budget or any changes, that'll come back in May and June, because that's when I have to submit my operating budget for.
And I appreciate you
yeah,
going through
yeah.
it. I just think that it's going to be tough the next few years if they can't figure out. They're already looking at, millions of dollars additional this year again. So, I mean, it's getting to a point where, okay, where do we stop?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no.
Because it's just going to fall on us here and then fall on our citizens. So.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to item number 5. Consider MMPA termination agreement for electric vehicle charging station. Mr. Huttunen.
All right. Thanks again, Council President and members. A couple years ago, I think it was 2021, the MMPA and Water and Light worked together to put an electronic vehicle charging station in the River Cinema movie theater parking lot. That electronic charger is no longer supported by the company that installed it. That company doesn't exist in North America anymore. MMPA has ultimately decided that this program is not seen enough use to make it feasible or worthwhile to reinvest in it. And so they've asked Keith and Water and Light to terminate the agreement, and there'd be a fee for that termination, which would cover the cost of our Water and Light staff removing the equipment. I would open it up for Keith. Just maybe the last thing that he shared with me on it is that the type of charging station that is there is a Type 2 charger, which is about a 4 to 6 hour charge on a vehicle. And it's becoming more and more cost effective for people that want or desire that type of charger to actually have it installed in their home. And the chargers that are seeing success in public parking spaces like this are fast chargers, which is obviously not is going to cost more money to install, and so far hasn't been something that MMPA has adopted a plan for. So with that, Keith, anything you have to add?
Well, I think he said it just right.
Keith, do we have any records on how often this charger was used?
Yeah, every month. I would report that to the commission every now and then. Maybe 1 or 2 a month at most.
One or two times a month.
Yeah, it was maybe a couple dollars. We'd get. It was 25-cent charge, and I think we got 15 cents, and they got 10 cents because they were. It was like $2, or a big month was maybe $10 or something. There really wasn't a lot of use, and just like he said, the other larger communities that we're members with, they even said the same thing, that they want the faster chargers. And so we thought, since it's not working, it wasn't very good PR to have it sitting there and nobody to maintain it, because they had issues with it when it got cold. The card reader wouldn't work. It was too cold. So
Pilot program.
yeah.
Right, yeah. And the city did not pay for this charger, is that correct?
Nope.
That's important.
All the city did was gave the spaces. You signed an agreement and allowed us to put them in.
Okay. Any questions for Reid or Keith? All right, thank you. All right, moving on to item number 6, request to advertise for mechanic position. Mr. Stordahl.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have 2 mechanics at the Public Works shop, and one has given notice that he'll be retiring here shortly. It's looking like about middle to end of May when will be his final date. What we'd like to do is try to hire somebody in his place and then potentially have him come back in and mentor that person for a few weeks in their current position. But at this time, we're just asking council to allow us to open up the hiring process so we can advertise for hire and start the selection process.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Stordahl? All right, I see none.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 7. Consider proposed increases to 2025 summer recreation fees. Mr. King.
Thank you, Council President, City Council, and Mayor. In the 2025 budget, we included an increase to our summer recreation fees. We keep a close eye on our fees. We monitor our incoming revenue and then use our fees to offset those costs, such as utilities, supplies, staffing. We haven't had a fee increase on the summer recreation side in 2 years. So in the 2025 budget, we put a 5% increase in there. And then we rounded it to the nearest whole dollar amount. The graph in front of you is a comparison between the 2024 activity fees and the proposed fees. My request would be to approve the fees as proposed. We'd start registration on April 24th for the summer activities. There will be no increase to the pool this year as we increase those fees 2 years in a row, and we still feel comfortable with where those fees are sitting.
Okay, any questions for Mr. King? Mr. Helms.
Just one. How are we in line with, as far as Grand Forks goes? Do you know? Or are we just curious?
It's hard to compare on these as far as tennis and playground. We're very comparable. With softball and baseball, it's a little bit trickier to compare because we have some different travel teams in there. So they run an in-house rec league where they just play themselves and they don't have any travel, and then those travel teams are ran through a different organization. Ours is all in one. So if you compare the 2 fees together, we're in line with what they're doing as well. It just doesn't quite look that way. If you were to go into the Grand Forks page, and you would see that all their baseball, they have different names for their 12U would be called Pee Wee baseball. They would probably have a fee set of $100 or so, but that's just an in-house rec league where we have different travel and things. So, long way to answer the question. I think we're in the neighborhood.
Jeremy, these programs here on the list, are they pretty full each summer, or is there a lot of vacancies in any one of them?
No, they're pretty full. On the playground, it hits capacity. I would say out of those programs on the list, probably tennis has our lowest attendance out of everyone, but softball and baseball, they all have pretty good attendance.
Great.
So I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, and I can include that on the next one. But typically for softball, we have four teams, and then for baseball this year, I think we'll probably have around 8 teams.
I think coaching is actually the hardest part of it.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
That's been the problem the last couple of years.
Yep.
Is not having enough coaches for the amount of kids that are being signed up.
So no, the programs are healthy.
Okay. Any further questions for Mr. King? I see none. Okay, let's move on to item number 8. Request to start recreation facilities improvement projects RFQ. Mr. King.
Back in 2021, the city issued an RFQ for the Recreation Facility Improvements Project. Following that RFQ process, the project was assigned to construction engineers, and they served as a construction manager through the pre-sales tax vote phase of that project. At the time, no official contract was signed with them because there was no project to be awarded because the sales tax kept getting pushed down the line. So after the sales tax passed in November, we picked that contract up again and started looking at it. We sent that contract off to Kennedy and Graven to be reviewed. What we found out in the last couple of weeks is that there's a new statute that went into place in July of 2024, which made it so our RFQ process that took place in 2021 was no longer valid. So we met with construction engineers and we met with Kennedy and Graven, and we looked at a bunch of different possible solutions, but at the end of the day, it felt like the only solution that was in the best interest of the city was to start the RFQ process over again. So it does puts us behind a couple months on the design process and the construction manager side of things. I laid out a timeline here of what that could look like. I don't have the RFQ written up yet, planning to have that by the end of the week, and then I'll have that for all of you by next Tuesday to vote on. If it's passed at that meeting by March 19th, that could go out for advertisement. We would have the RFQ due on April 9th, go through the RFQ scoring process, then we would according to the statute, we need to do an RFP after that. So we would have a deadline of April 21st on the RFP. Hoping, and these dates are approximate, to do interviews with the finalists of the RFP process on April 25th, and then following the council meeting on May 6th, award that the contract to the winning construction manager on that May 7th. In the meantime, we can still, now that we have defined what our process will look like and what type of contract we'll sign with the construction manager, now we'll be able to get into the design portion of it and sign the contracts with the design team. So my recommendation here would be to approve us to start that process to keep everything moving forward on the facility improvements project.
Okay, any questions for Mr. King? I see none. All right, thank you. Okay, that brings us to the end of our agenda here. I would be looking for a motion to adjourn.
Move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Meeting is closed.